So let's talk about how to improve the fighting in Dragon Ball. Now, I love Dragon Ball. The one of the things I love the most about Dragon Ball, and a lot of people love about Dragon Ball, is the fighting in Dragon Ball, the choreography, the fluidity of the animation, and the beautiful art style. It is just really great when it does with fighting. And I know a lot of people might like, other animes like Naruto with their fighting styles and stuff. But personally, I really love Dragon Ball's fighting and the way they, depict it and the way it's shown. But there is something that is missing in the Dragon Ball fights that I see in other, franchises, mainly in comic books, that I feel like it would definitely improve the fight scenes in Dragon Ball and add more to it. And this is something that I've wanted for years now. And it might seem a little weird what my solution to, the fight scenes will be, but I personally do think that this is the best, option or possibility they can go out with when it comes to, fixing the fighting. And that is to let these characters have the ability to fight in outer space without needing to breathe. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, what's the purpose of it? What's the importance of, having that? Well, the importance for me is the fact that it'll put their fights on a far more grander scale of fighting. Because one of the arguments that a lot of people make about why Dragon Ball characters aren't that powerful is because they usually fight on the planet and they're not destroying the planet, and they might destroy like some small parts of the city, or the area that they're at. And the argument to that is, they can control their energy and put it in a smaller space, which is true, so they don't damage the area that they're at. But I feel like we don't need that. If they just had them the ability to survive in outer space without breathing, we wouldn't need to go through that and have this little discussion. And the reason why Toriyama never did that was, or not the reason he didn't do that, one of the things that Toriyama has with problems when it comes to making the manga was the fact that he didn't want to do extra work. He liked to make shortcuts, so most of his fights were in the wasteland where it's just a bunch of rocks he had to draw. And he didn't like doing fights in the city because he didn't like drawing all these buildings and stuff like that. He would do it once in a while, but he want to usually draw stuff that's simplistic. And I understand that. I'm not a mangaka myself, and being a mangaka is very hard because you're there for hours trying to draw these panels hand by hand. Especially back then, you did so much work writing the story, doing the storyboard, then drawing it, and then they had a limited amount of time. And I think he did say at one point that he only had 2 hours to sleep in total within a week, which is ridiculous, and I understand that. But I felt like just giving the ability to the Dragon Ball characters, mainly the Saiyans, to be able to survive in outer space without breathing would have been able to amend a lot of that problems, because he wouldn't need to draw rocks. Let's be honest, fighting in outer space, the art style for outer space, it's a lot more simplistic. All you would have to do is, well, mainly it's going to be dark, so you're not going to have to draw mostly there. Second of all, most of the other stuff is just going to be tiny little bit of lights, which could either be stars or faraway galaxies. And once in a while, you might draw like a planet that they're approaching or asteroids. But usually, the art style for outer space will be a lot more simplistic and a lot less than riding, on a planet which has rocks and buildings and trees and stuff like that. So if Toriyama wanted to avoid, all that extra hard work, which I understand, he could have simply just put the setting into outer space, because a lot of animes and comic books especially do these fights with these very powerful characters in outer space to showcase how powerful they are. And Dragon Ball characters are absurdly powerful, but a lot of times they're fighting on the Earth, and let's be honest, or need to find a planet. And let's be honest, they should be destroying these planets. And even with that, statement about, them controlling it, it still doesn't look that good. I feel like it will be just far more beneficial to have them be able to breathe in outer space. Now, some people have argued throughout the years, can the Saiyans breathe in outer space? But it has been definitively disproven with Frieza, what he mentioned with Goku not being able to survive in space. And some people say, well, he didn't say he can't breathe, but let's be honest, the only reason he would not be able to survive in space is because he cannot breathe in outer space. Is just that simple. And then we had it with, we had it throughout other couple of times too. But the Battle of Gods fight, I think that was the closest we had to these guys fighting in outer space. Sorry for the noise there. But yeah, that's the closest we had to fighting in outer space. They stated though it was in the stratosphere, which that is not the stratosphere. The stratosphere was where, like, airplanes fly. They were technically in the exosphere, which is above the Earth, where you can see you down, and is above the clouds, and it's where the dark part of outer space is, and that's where they were fighting. So technically, it was not in the stratosphere, but the exosphere, which is technically not what's the thing called? that's not it's even though it's not completely without oxygen, it does have a low amount of oxygen. But I felt like they could have, got rid of this problem by just simply saying, hey, when you go into Super Saiyan God, you have this godly essence and godly power, and with that godly power comes the ability to survive in different, situations, such as surviving in outer space without any oxygen. So they could have done that and had these battles in outer space. Because if I'm being honest, and I'm pretty sure other people are sick and tired of seeing these guys, these powerful as beings, fight on planets or need to go to another planet or do these stories to write around how they end on another planet and stuff. I feel like it is just better to have them fight in deep space. Can you imagine how cool it would be to see these guys punching each other through planets and stars and, just wiping out galaxies with their energy attacks? That would be so much more cooler than, they're just on a planet destroying giant rocks and creating massive explosions. And it will open up more to these fights because now they don't have to have these excuses on being on a planet and can just be in deep space. And I feel like it's definitely holding them back in the fighting category when it comes to that. So the choreography would be a lot better. And like I said, the big problem that Toriyama has with these fights is that he doesn't want to draw too much. But if you do it in outer space, you don't have to make it too detailed either. And this will definitely benefit the power scaling a lot too, because it'll showcase how powerful these characters are. I think this will just only benefit the fighting and the combat in Dragon Ball. And I feel like Toriyama not doing this and relying solely on just putting them on planets and stuff and having them to breathe, I do think it ruins it and it makes it less impressive to see in these fights. Personally, I want to know what you guys think in the comment section down below. What would you guys want to see more in the fight? Do you guys agree with me in wanting this? Is it just because I want, the power scaling to be more impressive, or maybe it's because simply I just want the fights to be better? Because I do want the power scaling to be a higher level and this will, showcase it, but I also just want to see these fights, not be so constricted. I feel like it's constricted. It's like, well, you have to fight on this planet, you have to fight in a place with an atmosphere, and it makes it more limited. And I want them to fight in outer space and do more cool stuff like in other fiction or worlds. Dragon Ball characters are insanely powerful, but they're not doing that either, so it's just like weird to me. So yeah, I want to know what you guys think about that.